Hello guys, gals and non-binary pals, welcome back to Budget Brew with me, Lotus. Today we're going to be brewing another Commander Legends commander, Sarevok, Deathbringer, and the background Street Urchin. So Sarevok is 3 and a black for a legendary human knight 3/4. And his ability is at the beginning of each player's end step, if no permanents left the battlefield this turn, that player loses X life, where X is Sarevok's power. And his background is commander creatures you own have pay 1 and sacrifice another creature or artifact. This creature deals 1 damage to any target. So this background will actually give us a chance to sacrifice stuff to make things leave the battlefield so we don't get affected by our commander's ability. This isn't a force sacrifice style deck. We're playing on the fact that our opponents have to have a permanent leave the battlefield. How it happens is mostly up to them. We may be persuading them in certain ways on how to do it, but most of the time people will think we're just making them sacrifice everything, but there's many ways things can leave the battlefield. So let's start with ramp at the minute. We have Burnished Heart, which we can sacrifice. It's Commander Sphere, which we can sacrifice. Navigation Orb, one of the new cards, which is a 3 mana artifact for 2 and tap, and sacrifice it. We search for up to 2 basic lands or gates, reveal them, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other in our hand. We have Stone Speaker Crystal, another new card. 4 mana, taps for 2 colourless, but for 2 and tap we can sacrifice it to exile any number of target players' graveyards and draw a card. We also have Treasure Chest at 4 and sacrifice Treasure Chest, roll a d20. If we roll a 1 it's trapped and we lose 3 life. Between 2 and 9 we create 5 treasure tokens which we can then sacrifice later. 10 to 19 we gain 3 life and draw 3 cards. And if we roll a 20 we search our library for a card. If it's an artifact card we may put it onto the battlefield, otherwise we put it into our hand and shuffle. Rakdos Cluestone is another mana rock but can be sacrificed to draw a card. Undercity Scrounger is from the Kamigawa set for 2 and a black. It's a 1/4 artifact human rogue. We create a treasure token, activate only if a creature died this turn. And Wayfarer's Bauble, we can sacrifice a ghost to get some land. Now we need card draw. Again, this is going to fit our theme, so Altar's Reap, as an additional cost, sacrifice a creature to draw 2 cards. Deadly Dispute, we can sacrifice an artifact or creature to draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. Dungeoneer's Pact, it enters the battlefield tapped sadly, but for 2 and tap we can sacrifice it to take the initiative, gain 3 life, draw a card and create a treasure token. So much value for that. Ica Wellspring, when it enters or is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, we draw a card, so we can play it, draw a card, and then Deadly Dispute it to draw more cards. Reckoner's Bargain, as an additional effect, we sacrifice an artifact or creature, we gain life equal to its mana value, and draw 2 cards. Shadowheart Dark Justica, 3 and a black for a legendary human elf cleric. It has 1 and a black, tap, sacrifice another creature, draw X cards where X is that creature's power. Skullport Merchant, when it enters, it creates a treasure token, and for 1 and a black, we can sacrifice another creature or treasure to draw a card. And Village Rites. As additional cost, sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. We have a lot of ways here to remove permanents from our battlefield for benefit for us, while also not suffering the consequences of our commander. But now we have some self-sacrifice to continue that theme of not suffering our commander's wrath. Anawan the Ruined Sage, at the beginning of our upkeep, each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature, so this is guaranteed for something to leave the battlefield this turn. Bellowing Mauler, at the beginning of our end step, each player loses 4 life unless they sacrifice a non-token creature. If we stack the triggers for this to resolve first, potentially we can actually get something to leave the battlefield. Cauldron Familiar, single black for a 1/1 cat. When it enters, we drain our opponents for 1 life, and we can sacrifice a food to return it from the graveyard to the battlefield. And yes, we are running the counterpart, but we'll come to that later. Chain Devil, 3 and a black for a 4/2 devil. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a non-token creature, which is more beneficial than people realise. Dance Macabre, 3 black for a sorcery. Each player sacrifices a non-token creature, roll a d20, and add the toughness of the creatures you sacrifice this way. 1 to 14. Return a creature card put into the graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. 15 plus. Return up to 2 creature cards put into the graveyard this way under our control. Dusk Mangler, 5 black for a horror 5/4. As additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, discard a card, or play 4 life. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature, discards a card, and loses 4 life. Elixir of Immortality, 1 mana for an artifact, 2 and tap, gain 5 life. Shuffle Elixir of Immortality and your graveyard into your library. So this will leave the battlefield, helping our commander not kill us. Extract the Truth, 1 and a black for a sorcery. We can choose one of the 2 effects. Target opponent reveals their hand, choose a creature, enchantment, or planeswalker card from it. That player discards that card. Or target opponent sacrifices an enchantment. Goblin Bombardment, 1 and a red for an enchantment. Sacrifice a creature. Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to any target under the new rules. Indulgent Tormentor, 3 black for a demon. It's a 5/3 with flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card unless target opponent sacrifices a creature or pays 3 life. Miracle's Edict, 1 and a black for a sorcery, re-roll a d20. 1 to 9, choose an opponent, that player sacrifices a creature. 10 to 19, each opponent sacrifices a creature, or if you roll a 20, each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. Either way, it's a good effect for 2 mana. Oni Cult Anvil, black and a red for an artifact. Whenever 1 or more artifacts you control leave the battlefield during your turn, create a 1/1 colourless construct artifact creature token, but it only triggers once each turn. But we can tap and sacrifice an artifact for the anvil to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and we gain 1 life. So as long as we have an artifact, we can keep creating more artifacts by sacrificing them to this, making another 1/1 artifact, saving ourselves from our commander. Sifris, Nightmare Speaker, 3 and a black for a Snake Cleric Warlock, a 3/3 with tap. Sacrifice another creature or an artifact. For each opponent, you mill a card, then return a card from your graveyard to your hand unless that player pays 3 life. Smallpox, double black for a sorcery. Each player loses a life, discards a card, sacrifices a creature, and then sacrifices a land. It's a bit extreme, but sometimes we just need to get a few things done. Smothering Abomination, 2 black for an Eldrazi with Devoid, so it has no colour. A flying 4/3, at the beginning of our upkeep we sack a creature. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, we draw a card. And the Long Reach of Night is 3 and a black. It's a saga with the first 2 chapters being each opponent sacrifices a creature unless they discard a card, so they have the option. And then exile this saga and return it to the battlefield transformed under our control. Timoret the Murder King, black and a red for a zombie warrior. We can pay 1 and a red, sacrifice another creature. Timoret the Murder King deals 2 damage to target player. 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature, return Timoret from our graveyard to our hand. Viscera Seer, 1 mana, sack a creature, scry 1. Here's the other part of the cat, the Witch's Oven. 1 mana for an artifact. We can sacrifice it to create food, which will also then help us bring the cat back, making permanents leave the battlefield anytime we want. A little bit of recursion as we're sacrificing a lot. Bonecaller Cleric is 1 and a black. For 3 and a black, we can sacrifice it to return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. And as it doesn't cause this to tap, we can do it as soon as it enters. Fate's Reversal is 1 and a black. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand and venture into the dungeon. Grave Endeavour, 5 black for an instant. Roll 2d10 and choose one result. Return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to that result. Then each opponent loses X life and we gain X life, where X is the other result. Lorcan, Warlock Collector, 5 black for a flying 6/6 devil. Whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you may pay life equal to its mana value. If you do, put it onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Warlock in addition to its other types. If a Warlock we control would die, exile it instead. And finally, Reassembling Skeleton, 1 and a black for a Skeleton Warrior 1/1. For 1 and a black, return Reassembling Skeleton from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, ready to be sacrificed again. Now we need to remove some things, because it's not just sacrifice that our commander cares about. Chaos Wall, to make things leave the battlefield, as always. Deadly Tempest, destroy all creatures, each player loses life equal to the number of creatures they controlled that were destroyed this way. Disrupt Decorum, you're bound to make someone lose something. Feed the Swarm, a good old enchantment removal for these colours. Hurl Through Hell, 2 black-red for an instant. We exile target creature. Until end of our next turn, we may cast that card and we may spend mana as though it was mana of any colour to cast that spell. Rakdos Charm, Terminate, and Tormod's Crypt, just in case the graveyards get a little full. And now the rewards for what we're doing beyond what our commander's doing. Agent of the Iron Throne, 2 and a black for a background, but we're having it in the 99. Commander creatures we own have whenever an artifact or creature we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. Bastion of Remembrance. Whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses life and we gain a life. Jory, Master of the Review. Whenever we sacrifice a permanent, put a +1 counter on Jory. When it dies, deal damage equal to its power to any target. Mahadi, at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each creature that died this turn. Mayhem Devil, whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. Ogre Slumlord, whenever another non-token creature dies, you may create a 1/1 black rat creature token, and as long as we have Ogre Slumlord, rats we control have Death Touch. Sangromancer, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we may gain 3 life, negating our 3 life lost from our commander if we ever get it. And whenever an opponent discards a card, we also may gain 3 life. And Vrok, 3 black for a 3/3 bird demon with flying. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, each opponent loses 3 life. So either way, they're taking the damage. And finally, Zombie Ogre. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, venture into the dungeon. Now a little bit of life manipulation. Bloodseeker, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, we may have that player lose a life. Death Greeter, whenever another creature is put into a graveyard from play, we can gain a life. Vulcanwrath Noble, when this or another creature dies, target player loses a life and we gain a life. And Sir Conrad, whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves our graveyard, Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent. And for 1 and a black, each player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. For a little bit of support, we have Battle Mage's Braces. For 2 and a red, a quick creature has haste, which is always good. And whenever an ability of a crit creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 1. If you do, copy that ability, you may choose new targets for the copy. Although it doesn't activate for all abilities, our commander does have an activated ability with its background, so we can sacrifice a creature or artifact only once, but get 2 of the deal 1 damage to any targets. Ghost Lantern is a single black for an equipment, and it also has an adventure for 1 and a black. So its adventure is return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand, which is always handy, and the equipment is whenever a creature you control dies, put a +1 counter on equipped creature. So if we equip this to our commander, the damage that our opponents will take will increase every time. Swiftfoot Boots, just to give hexproof and haste. An Unspeakable Symbol. 1 black for an enchantment. Pay 3 life and put a +1 counter on target creature. The target creature will be our commander, so the life people will have to pay if a permanent didn't leave the battlefield in their turn is going to get quite nasty. And then we have the mana base. Cryptic Caves, so we can sacrifice it to draw a card. Evolving Wilds, so we can sacrifice it. Field of Ruin to deal with some annoying lands like Field of the Dead, but also so a permanent can leave the battlefield. Guildless Commons, although seems to be an odd inclusion in this style of deck, it returns another land to our hand which counts towards our commander's goal. Maestro's Theatre, it sacrifices and gets a land but also gains a life. Rakdos Carnarium comes into the battlefield but then returns a land to our hand, so again helps our commander, and if we've got both Guildless Common and Rakdos Carnarium, we can just bounce the two together. Riveteer's Outlook to help us get a swamp or a mountain and gain a life, and Terramorphic Expanse to also leave the battlefield and get us a basic land. Tramway Station enters tapped, but we can sacrifice it later to draw a card. And Underdark Rift, we can pay 5, tap and exile it, which will leave the battlefield, roll a d10 and put target artifact, creature or planeswalker into its owner's library beneath the top X cards of that library, where X was the result. So it also helps to remove a few annoying things. And then we round out with 8 mountains and 15 swamps. Here's the deck list, all in its full glory, just under $30 of the recording of the video by TCG market price. I've played the deck a few times and it's been really fun. But what's your thoughts on the deck? Is there anything that you would add or change? If you're not doing it on a budget, what would you do instead? I'd like to see your comments below. If there's any decks that you'd like to see made on a budget, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, consider subscribing, like and share. Consider joining the Discord or the Patreon, and thank you very much for getting to the end of the video. It really means a lot that you stuck around. Have a great day and look after yourself.